how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
For this episode, I sit down with Michael Kooman and Chris Dimond. And it's a wonderful conversation. These guys share the beginning of their collaboration together, how they've gotten better at collaborating, the human connection in writing stories and music, what they've got better at in terms of negotiating and having these conversations when having to use that other part of the brain in pitching their projects, not just creating, and finding that balance in life on all things music and theater. This conversation is wide-ranging, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did having the conversations with Michael Kooman and Chris Dimond. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me, in person, Michael Kooman, Chris Dimond. Kooman and Dimond. Yes. This is exciting, guys. Thank you for sitting down with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yes, I have. It's wonderful because I've seen and heard your work now for a number of years, you know, being in theater, and it's really fun to meet you and understand where that comes from for you and what that means to you guys. So I'd love to get right into this. When did the collaboration begin for you two? What did that look like?
Well, so Chris and I both went to Carnegie Mellon University. I was a music major, so I was like studying music composition major. So I was like studying like string quartets and choral music and orchestral music, and I was sort of just like wanting to like write musical theater, and thankfully Carnegie Mellon had this great theater program, so I started like taking classes in there. I started accompanying there for some of their productions, and this one class that we had was this libretto writing class, and Chris was in it. It was called libretto, but like as we all know, as musical theater experts here, libretto is the book, but except it was a lyric writing class for whatever reason. It was a mistitled class.
All right.
But we met there. Chris had some great lyrics in that class, and I just like admired his lyrics. I thought they were funny and witty and like a little bit naughty. And after we took this class together, I asked him if he wanted to start working together on something, and we started writing like little ditties, and then we started writing musicals, and then we sort of moved to New York together around the same time, and we've now written like 10 musicals, and here we are.
Yeah, in the heart of New York.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first thing you guys worked on? What was that? Was it a story? Was it a song? Was it a
We worked
musical?
on a number of self-contained songs. It was actually a fundraising project for the senior musical theater majors at
great.
CMU. So we kind of, in our first meeting, the first time we ever really talked in any depth, we kind of sat down at a coffee shop in Pittsburgh and just threw out ideas that we had for songs that we thought might be fun or funny or interesting. And so we came up with 3 or 4 that we immediately started working on, one of which was an idea we had that we thought was funny, for a song that was a song of complaint for an actress who was tired of being cast as the token black girl in every musical. And so that song became Random Black Girl, which we wrote for our classmate Bettina Miller at the time. So we thought it would be really fun to write a song for her. So that was one of the first songs that we wrote together was that.
You serious?
Yeah, which ended up, getting us a decent amount of exposure on when that video of her performing it went up on YouTube, and all of her subsequent success obviously got it a lot of attention. So
yeah, because that was actually like the year 2006, I think. So that like we were like one of actually 20 videos on YouTube back then. No, I'm teasing. Yeah. But like, you know what I mean? It was like early enough that I feel like we put the video up at the right time. Mm-hmm. Because like it just there wasn't that many new musical theater. I mean, I think like there was a bit of a wave, if you remember, like in the mid-aughts, shall we call them, where like, Kerrigan and Loudermilk and like Joe Iconis and all these people started putting all their stuff up on YouTube, because before that there wasn't a great way to find new musical theater writers that had not had to work on Broadway. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like because of all this like social media and the way it's the way you can put your stuff up now. It's just like so much better for young writers who haven't yet had that like Broadway show that had a 14 million capitalization, you know, because it's so hard to get there. So we certainly took YouTube and took advantage of it.
Okay. So according to the web, you, Michael, are music, and Chris, you're book and lyrics.
Yes,
But
correct.
there is cross-pollination.
Definitely.
You both play instruments, or is it like what? I'm just curious what that is.
Sure. I would not say that I play. I sometimes hold instruments and make sound out of them, but not in a
play
way
guitar.
that I do, but not in a way that anyone would enjoy listening to other than myself. So
It's not that
yeah,
bad.
Michael is far more the skilled musician, but there is a lot of back and forth. It is very collaborative. You know, the longer we've worked together, the more cross-pollination there is.
Yeah.
Part of it is like, you know, it takes a while to get super comfortable with somebody. I mean, it is a certain kind of relationship that we have. You know, it's like we're sitting in a room with each other at this point, like 4 to 6 hours a day, just writing. And we've found that the best way to write is really just to sit in the same room and do it. And that means like, okay, I'll come up with a melody for a chorus. I'll give it to him. He's playing with it, and he's like, I need like 2 more syllables in the second line because I just can't say anything with the 4 syllables you gave me. And I'm like, okay, let me see if I can expand that to a couple more syllables. You know, it's a back and forth, and then he'll write something, and I'll be like, I love this lyric, but the way this word falls on the melody feels weird. Can we just like come up with another word? And so is there another 2-syllable word for happiness or something that we can use, but just because of the way that, you know, we're just trying to like, there's so many weird things we're thinking about, but I do think being in the same room and sort of like bouncing that idea off of each other is the best way to do it. And, you know, Chris similarly can be like, he's like, sometimes he'll just be like, this is like too slow for this moment, or this feels like we're writing songs now for a kids show and on television. And Chris, one of the notes was like, he's like, I think this is just not kid enough. Like this is not youthful enough. And I'm like, okay, that's great. What can I do to adapt this? You know, it's sort of like an immediate back and forth. I don't know if that exactly was your question, but
It is.
But it's just like it's become something that like we both comment on each other's work and get that feedback immediately and just sort of like go back and forth until we have a full song, really.
Yeah. That's incredible. Do you guys okay, so do you, I guess we'll go back to like starting out together. Did you guys have goals in terms of, you know, we're collaborating, we want to create a show? Or was it just a song cycle situation or just single songs and you're like, oh, you know, maybe we should take a whack at a show?
Yeah, the first project that we worked on together was mostly self-contained cabaret songs that sort of became a song cycle called Homemade Fusion. And then, so that was in my first year of graduate school was when we first started collaborating. Yeah. And then the second year of the playwriting program at CMU, you're required to write a thesis project, your thesis play. And I was fortunate enough to convince the head of the playwriting program to allow me to write my thesis project as a musical. And Michael had graduated there in 2006. And I also convinced him to stick around in Pittsburgh for an extra year in order to collaborate on a full musical, since we had never done that before. Yeah. So that became the first actual book musical that we wrote together, which is a show called Danny Girl.
Okay. And then you had so you started on YouTube, right? You put that's the initial foray into the public domain for you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't sheet music or
No.
something along those lines.
No.
It was all YouTube. And then was there a quick discussion? I mean, you can add to that. Quick discussion of like, oh, we should get this out, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we got like questions, you know, from like YouTube comments or, you know, like messages that were like, how do we get the sheet music? And at a certain point we were like, well, we need to like figure this out. And, you know, honestly, we had no idea how to do it. We just like put a button on our website and we were like, there was a point where we were just like manually sending sheet music, if you can imagine.
Like you print it.
No, I don't think we ever printed it. We always did it digitally.
It was all digital.
But I'm saying like, whereas, you know, like now you click on music notes and it'll just send it to you immediately
No
or
human.
give you a download link. We were like sending it we were like totally the musical theater version of a mom and pop store. We were like, oh, okay, I'll send it directly to this person. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like part of this thing is like, we both love writing songs. We both love writing musical theater, but like it's a different thing entirely to figure out how to like make a living doing it. Yeah. So for example, I mean, yeah, like putting it up on YouTube was great back then. We didn't realize that there would be people who would want to perform our songs,
Yeah.
And so we figured out a way to put it in sheet music. And then we were like, oh, we can put an accompaniment track here as well and make that available. It's just sort of like figuring out, I hate to be like a millennial here and be like, but like figuring out how to monetize the work that we do was a completely different thing it's a completely different skill than writing and being able to write. So yeah, part of our journey is just like, first of all, trying to get better at writing and trying to write a lot of shows and write a lot of songs, but also figure out how to make a living in this industry. It's kind of like tough, but there are ways to do it.
Yeah. Was that always the thought that you wanted to make a living, doing that in this industry?
That was always the goal.
Yeah,
Certainly. I think I speak for both of us when I said we always wanted to write and to write the kind of stuff that we want to write and to, support ourselves through that. That's the dream, really. It's certainly not easy to do, and there have been discouraging moments along the way, but starting out, I think we had big dreams and that kept those, tempered those with realistic expectations, but have step by step found a way to carve out a living in it, which has been really, we both feel incredibly blessed and fortunate to be able to do.
Yeah, with those ups and downs, when you have a dip or valley, so to speak, the conversation to keep going, to push through it, this is a meant to be situation, or is that, was that ever a conversation, or was it kind of like, no, like, duh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that there was that we ever had a conversation about stopping, really. That it was always about how to keep going through the challenges that come up, and that's one of the many nice things about having a collaborator is you've always got someone to boost you up when you do have those difficult moments. So yeah, for us, I don't know that it was ever really a question. It was a matter of how do we do this, and what do we need, what may we need to do along the way to support it. Yeah. But even in the dark times, I don't know that we ever really
You're like, we're gonna
thought
quit.
about
like,
quitting the
that's
business or anything.
Yeah, but even being flexible and changing your expectations, or like, I don't know if there's a particular story or moment where you had that realization and opened up a whole series of opportunity.
Totally. I mean, I don't know if it's a specific situation, but I at a certain point, like, I think when we started writing and this whole like putting things up and creating a website and doing all that stuff, we realized that we had a lot of agency in our own career and that we had to produce our own work until people wanted to produce it. We had to, which includes putting that stuff up on YouTube, but also making albums and doing concerts. So there's a certain amount of like entrepreneurialness that I feel like when we didn't have work or we weren't getting a lot of income, we were just like, okay, well, let's create the next project. Let's not wait for someone to produce our work. Let's not wait for someone to put up a cabaret of our work. Let's not wait to get a commission. Like, let's write the show or let's create this album. Yeah, I think my dad is an entrepreneur, and I feel like I inherited this like entrepreneurial spirit from him. So there's something about that I feel like. I do feel like the cool thing about what we're doing today is you have the ability to make a living in a lot of different ways in the music industry. The bad thing is that it takes a lot of self-motivation, I think, to do it. And that's I think probably a lot of your listeners are actors. I think that's something I always talk about with actors. I say, make your own cabaret. Like, don't wait to get cast in something, just like put your own show together, get your own materials out there and write your own show. If you're not a writer, team up with a writer, have someone write you a song or a little show, do a cabaret. I think there's something about like just the self-motivating part that is both hard but also inspiring to me, just because I think I really just want to write. I just love it and I love doing it. So there's a part of that inspires me to release an album or to write a new show or do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And along the journey, with the two of you, has it gotten easier, or have moments occurred that have like opened up the floodgates to take bigger chances, to make bigger mistakes and have bigger successes?
Totally. So we just wrote 3 seasons of the show called Vamp Arena on the Disney Channel, which was like awesome and totally like life-changing. And it was just like so awesome in so many different ways. It was also very hard. It's a completely different industry, you know? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but if I had to break it down to like 2 or 3, I would say the big thing is that you're in theater as a writer, you own your work and you kind of have the last say on your work. Yeah. Whereas if you're writing for a television show, there are a lot of people that have to approve this, you know, for many reasons. I mean, just even from the fact that like there's standards and practices on that you have to.
Especially the bigger the company.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
there's a certain amount of like. I think what's awesome about television though is it teaches you to be able to rewrite really, really quickly, and it teaches you not to be precious about your work, because like you get notes and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? And then you go back, you mourn your song a little bit, and then you write something else and you're like, yeah, actually maybe this song is better than the one that I wrote before, you know? It teaches you to just think differently about it. But it's also hard because our work with Vamp Arena, we had to both write but also produce all of the tracks. So we became producers, really, you know, music producers, which is a different term in theater than it is in, you know, music, as in I'm in charge of nurturing the orchestrations to being created, filtering notes about all the musical things to the orchestrators and the audio mixers, but also like being in charge. I had to be in every recording session when they're singing a song on the voiceover artist side. But we live in New York, so we had to Skype into it a lot. Yeah. It's just it became a completely different beast than we had ever done before. I mean, it's all awesome. It's so cool. Such great skills that I mean, I can't believe Disney took a chance on us, honestly. But it was life changing. But like you were asking, like when it became possible to take chances, and I think after we did that. We had written 150 songs for this Vamp Arena show, and then we had a show that was in Seattle, The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes, and it had a world premiere, and it's like this show we had been working on for 8 years, and like it's just a crazy, weird show. It's like off the wall, super, hopefully funny, if I may say, and we were suddenly faced with this prospect of like, we've worked so hard on the show, we finally got this amazing production. What is going to happen with it? We were like, in this day and age, we need to record it, or else it's going to be lost. You know, like there's a world in which like this show could just like be this amazing production will never be remembered or whatever. Yeah. And so after we did these 3 seasons of Vamp Arena, we were like, you know what? Let's just take a chance and like self-produce and make this album. It was costly, but also it was just like so much work. Because, you know, it's a huge show. It's like 16 people. We had a 10-person orchestra, and then, so we're like mixing like, 26 tracks, we had so many takes. I don't know. It just like, this album I'm so freaking proud of it. It just also took so much out of us, because like it was just like we were in charge of both like the everyday small little tiny things, but also the overall artistic decisions that we're making. You know what I mean? So like whether it was good or bad was all on us, and it was also just a bit of a risk, but we were like, we need to get this out there, like the kind of thing these days is like, you just have to get your work out there. That's, I want people who live in Japan or the UK to be able to find this show, because I really think it's a great representation of what we do, and it's also very contrasting to the Vamp Arena work we did. So anyway, after did you like that 17-minute answer that I just gave?
I did.
Like, I can go back and I can continue.
He's loving it.
He's loving it.
No,
Chris knows I never talk this long. Like, I'm just a little quiet Nancy over here, usually. Quiet Nancy. That
is you.
I'm a quiet Nancy.
That's you in a nutshell, for sure.
Yeah, that's what Chris calls me.
That's definitely not what I call him, for the record.
Just because.
Just because.
So why The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes? What was the inception? What was the thought?
Michael, do you want to
Yeah, okay.
talk for another 15 minutes?
If you're listening, just fast forward 17 more minutes because I'm going to give a real long answer. No, I'm going to make you take this one, Chris.
All right. Reluctantly, I will interrupt your monologue. So when we started writing this show, we were really looking for a project. The first couple of musicals that we wrote were kind of dark comedies and dealt with really heavy subject matter in sort of unexpected ways, and that was really exciting to us. But we were looking to do something entirely different with this next one. So we were kicking around ideas, basically looking for something that would make a great elevator pitch that would also make a great musical. And somehow we stumbled upon the idea of what would happen if somebody woke up one day to discover that his or her life had become a musical. And so that was the germ of the idea that became The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes. We thought it was a concept that provided for the opportunity for a lot of comedy. We were both very drawn to using humor in various ways. I think it's a big part of both of our lives and the work that we like to do. So we really, really liked the comedic conceit of that. But we knew that it could very easily be a funny sketch that wouldn't sustain a full 90-minute musical. So we worked really hard to dig into what was beneath that idea and what would sustain that show for a whole evening. And I think what really kind of was the moment that we felt like we had something is when we discovered the heart of the piece and figured out what was going on in this man's life that music represented and that this metamorphosis was trying to get at and was trying to push him towards.
Did it take a while to get that?
It did take a while, yeah. It took at least a couple of drafts. I mean, this is a show that we developed for a really long time before it premiered. We worked on it for basically 10 years before it's had its world premiere. And so, you can see, I think in those early stages, you can see the genesis of that idea. You can see sort of the beginnings and the seeds of it. But it took us a while before we really clearly saw, this is what the show is about. And I think that's at least common for us, that we don't necessarily know what we're writing about until we've really started to write it. You know what I mean? You have an idea for something and you churn out a draft before that process kind of drives you toward the discovery of what it is you're actually trying to get at.
Yeah. And I'm also curious then, I've heard the term before. I'm curious if you use it, having like your trunk of music, and you have maybe a trunk of stories and thoughts and characters and ideas and vice versa. How much of that is put in, or was put into this, were there songs that you wrote, a year ago and you're like, wow, it's much better in this show than a single or whatever?
We don't usually do that much, actually. Like, for us, I think, at least these days, I'm trying to be like inspired by what I'm working on. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah.
I would say there's only one time recently that where you like threw away a melody and then like reused it entirely. But I try to be like, okay, what is this piece about? Like, what kind of like emotions or like what am I visualizing for this piece? I'm trying to find a sound for a piece, and when I'm doing that, I'm really trying to like let the piece and the characters inspire me, and because of that, I'm less likely to pull from an old melody or an old story, just because I feel like you know what, this is what we do. Like, this is like, if I can write a good melody on Monday, hopefully I can write a good melody on Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like, so like, I mean, I'm not super worried that I'm going to run out of ideas, or that I mean, it doesn't mean they're all going to be good, but I'm more inspired by like, what am I working on right now? And like, what is my mindset right now? How can I write consistent worlds within the musicals that I'm writing right now? How can I push myself right now? Chris, what are your...
I would say, that a lot of why that doesn't happen a lot to us has to do with one of the things that we both really agree on about the process of writing a musical, is that the story should determine what the songs are. So typically when we write a song for a piece, it is very, very specific to that particular moment in that show. And so it makes it very difficult then to extract that either entirely or and especially to put it in another show itself. Because another thing that we really believe in and strive for in our career is to not repeat ourselves and to not write two things that are similar. So a lot of the projects we've chosen to work on are pretty contrasting to another. So it would be really hard to take a song out of one show or write a song for a show, decide that it didn't work, and then to just plop it down into the middle of another show would be quite rare, quite coincidental that would work out.
Yeah. No, and it makes more sense now that you say it, because listening to like the large variety of stuff you've created, it doesn't all sound the same. It sounds like it was written by different people, which is right.
Oh, thank you.
That's the right thing.
That's quite a compliment.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We want to be a bit of a chameleon, you know what I mean? That's the coolest part about being a musical theater writer, as opposed to like maybe being a pop writer or a country writer or any other kind of songwriter, is that like we get to transport ourselves and hopefully our audiences to like, maybe we're going to France in the mid 1800s or something, and we let that kind of setting and tone inspire our work. Or, we're going to write like just a belty pop song for this number. It's just fun to like give yourself over and go wholeheartedly into a different genre, because I think it's just really fun. That to me is the most exciting part. Like, not just telling stories, but being like, what is this world that I'm working in? We're just doing it. We just started a new show that is going to be on a streaming platform that you all have heard of, but we cannot announce it yet.
Okay.
But the cool thing about it is it's the showrunner was like, I want to live in the musical world of John Williams, the classic composer of like Star Wars and Jurassic Park and all of these amazing scores. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, let me see. I want to like immerse myself in John Williams and see where my sensibility in musical theater sensibility meets John Williams, And so I'm super excited about this project right now, because I get to explore a completely different world, a completely different like sonic world. And again, like, I thankfully I have these tools that I learned as a composition major to be able to like go to all these other places, which I feel really lucky to have. But I also I'm so excited to like just be in this world for a little bit of this like sweeping orchestral cinematic kind of world, like, which I would never happen at musicals. They're like, hey, can you do that with a band of 4? And I'm like,
make it catchy.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
Right.
Can we do it with all just like actors who also play their instruments, so we don't have to pay for a band? I'm like, yeah, I guess. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly what you
that's
mean.
the kind of constraints we get in theater, but it's cool to work in that world for television.
Yeah. What's your homework process? You doing a lot of research before you create, or even put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the project, I would say. But at sort of early on in the process, we like to sort of try to figure out what our influences are for that particular project and spend some time figuring out what the sound or what the tone of a particular piece is. And so it's helpful to really immerse yourself in other examples of that and to find touchstones that you can use or point to as general directions of where to go.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, depending on the subject matter, there's a lot of research you may need to do in order to kind of really make sure you're well versed enough in the material to be able to write about it.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, specific to this John Williams thing, like, I made a Spotify playlist of all the John Williams stuff that I love, and like the ones that feel the most iconic, but also the ones that like I like used to just listen to John Williams all the time, so it was like kind of crazy that like I'm going back to this world. Yeah. But I had a phone call with my orchestrator, and I was like, okay, I did sort of like a page essay of like, here are the things that I think keep coming back in John Williams' work. Like, he has these like really great brass ostinatos that happens like that's the Olympic fanfare theme that he wrote for the 1996 Olympics. But that, he does the same kind of like fanfare thing in Jurassic Park.
Oh, it's Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. And so I broke it down. I was like, here's 8 things orchestrationally that keep coming back that I think make us feel like this orchestration is John Williams. And I was like, let's keep that in mind. But the cool thing about it is also, it's not like 100, the work that we're coming up with is not 100% John Williams. It's like, it's John Williams meets us, our sensibility. And it's also like, it's I don't know how to explain it. It's like we intended to write like, oh, full out John Williams, but we're finding the tone is like a John Williams tangent. You know what I mean? Like a John Williams adjacent, let's say, because in order to tell our story that we're telling with this in a musical way, we can't do full out that. It has to be a little bit. The show itself is a little more silly and fun, and John Williams is just awesome, but it's very adult and it's very serious, if that makes sense. So we're finding this different tone as we continue to write this stuff. I'm focusing on this project right now, but it's just something I'm really excited about. And it's like it's in the sort of like young stage, so it's sort of right in my head right now.
That's such an interesting parallel to like learning a dialect. You know, if you learn the R's and the vowels or whatever, you can, once you have that, you can say anything and you're speaking with an Irish accent or whatever, you know. So it's like that it's very interesting. As long as you hit those touchstones or those settings and effects or whatever, it's like you write any melody you want.
Oh, I love it. I've never studied a dialect. I mean, that's so crazy. I'm like we're just writers. Right? I was thinking we're just writers.
You guys create jobs. Do you know that?
I hope so. But the other day I was thinking, I was like, what? I was like, there's this line in one of the songs, Eyes of the Museum, and I was thinking on the way home after we wrote it, I was like, wait, isn't there a different way to say like the and the? Like, what are the rules? Isn't it LPA? Yeah. What is that rule? It's like sometimes you say the, like Eyes of the Museum or Eyes of the. Like, I don't know which one is correct.
Don't get me
Do you know? You don't? You don't know? Okay, but I was like, I remember like an actor I worked with like was like, well, it would be this if it's this, and I'm like, wow, I don't have any idea how that works. The rules of it's LPA, right? Like is that what it's called, Christopher? Do we all not know this?
I don't know the specifics on that.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm the composer,
thing,
and I know it.
The nice thing about when you're writing for musical theater is that the rules don't necessarily, in terms of grammar, don't necessarily need to apply if the character would not speak necessarily with proper grammar. So I tend to ignore that one entirely and just go on what feels right to the character to say.
How have you gotten better at writing like lyrics and story and getting in the character's mind and writing from a place that's not maybe your own necessarily? Has it gotten easier? Are there tricks that you use?
It's hard to really articulate it. I think in a way it is, you know, I started out in theater as an actor, and so I think that is a helpful background to have, because it really is sort of immersing yourself in the character and trying to, like you were talking about, studying a dialect and sort of figuring out, wrapping your mouth around the way a person speaks. I think it really is partly just getting that voice in your head and being able to communicate through that character. So you start off, I tend to start off thinking kind of broader in terms of what the plot is and the structure of the story, and then figuring ways into the characters' heads as they actively pursue their goals. And, you know, sometimes it takes a while to figure out exactly what a character's voice is, but once you get it, like, as you said, once you wrap your mouth around those R's and the L's or whatever it is, it sort of just flows.
Is that a lot of journaling for you, or is that a lot of pre-writing, or does it depend on the story? Sometimes
it does. I tend to overwrite a lot early on as good thing, right? I think that's the only real way to discover who those characters are is to write them and to put yourself in their heads and see where they go. You know, it's interesting now that you're forcing me to articulate it. I think
sorry.
No. It's really helpful, because I think it's more natural than a lot of people think, because I think that's what we do when we're kids. If you've ever watched a child play in any way, it's the exact process. They're just improvisatory actors, you know. They're making up stories and they're playing characters, and I think for me personally, I just never stopped doing that. It just sort of channeled its way into writing. So it's almost something that I don't necessarily think about even consciously. It just sort of happens, you know. It's that process of finding the bit of yourself that is within that character, finding where you and the character meet, and then seeing where that takes you.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and that makes so much sense. You know, as a kid, it's like revisiting the youthful creativity that people can lose, you know, if you don't focus on it, I guess, if you just kind of let it go. That's so, Sorry, was there, you gonna add?
No, I was just going to say, it's like a lot of playing around. I mean, I don't think it's that much different from being an actor and like trying to figure out, like, like your way in to the character, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got to figure out how you relate to this character. I think Chris said it well.
Yeah, you have to have some empathy, even if it's a bad person. You got to figure out what keeps
Absolutely.
them ticking. Otherwise, you can't truthfully portray it on stage, on paper, yada yada. Human communication. Curious what you guys have learned. So this is like a two-parter. We'll start with just human communication in writing. Has writing music, writing lyrics, writing these stories, has that made you better communicators?
Definitely. I mean, I would actually, the first thing that I think of is like when we've had to teach musical theater writing to people, like, because suddenly like this like shorthand that we have with each other is something that we have to then really like lucidly articulate to these people who
Translate.
Yeah, like we're like, wait, why do we do this? Like, why are rhymes important in musical theater writing? Why are perfect rhymes important? Like weird concepts that you don't even think about, like just because we do them all the time. We're like having to then articulate that, and just sort of like doing that. But also like the crazy thing about, again, your question was whether writing affects it, but it's more so for me in teaching, but also some of these recording sessions that we do. Sometimes it's really hard to talk about music to people that haven't necessarily studied it super duper in depth.
I believe it.
So sometimes translating musical concepts to someone who isn't thinking musically, because like especially if you've been trained in music, like what back phrase means or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like I'm like. I have to figure out a way to, maybe there's a bunch of kids on Vamp Arena, they might not know what the term back phrase is, or they might not know what the term like staccato or something like that is.
Sure.
And it's just sort of like learning how to speak in a way, like translate. It's just sort of like translating to a non-musical language, just if that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Okay, so along that vein of communication, how have you guys gotten better at, I want to use the word like negotiating, but it is a two-part business. You sit here in a completely safe space, create openly. Any idea is a good idea until it's not, and then you have a new idea, and it's just an open space. And then you have to take that, to a boardroom or someone who's going to represent you, and you have to almost have a second. I see it as a second, brain switch. Has that gotten easier? What is that balance for you?
Yeah, I think it's well, a couple things come to mind when you bring that up. I think our personal collaboration has really developed over time, and the more comfortable we've gotten with each other, the better we've gotten to know each other, the more open that communication is, and the easier it is to be open and vulnerable, and to give each other really honest feedback, which is a critical part of the process. The next step, I think, is always then bringing in whoever the other collaborators on the project are, and that can be difficult, particularly for us, since we have such a long-standing partnership in terms of our writing process. We may be working on a project with another writer, or with a director, or a team of designers who don't have that sort of relationship with us. You know what I mean? So it's sometimes tricky to navigate a new relationship when ours is so established, and then the process of I think what you're getting at, if I'm understanding you correctly, is then how do we sort of take that artistic idea and sell it or pitch it to someone else, and that's an entirely separate skill set, and one that we've really worked to develop and to get better at, and I think we're still trying to figure out how to get better at it. But I think part of what's most key about it, what we've really learned, is one, to not be afraid to be passionate about our work and to really believe in our work and to put forward what we are most passionate about it, and that will translate hopefully to someone else. Because when you are pitching to a producer or to an executive or whoever you're pitching to, even a director, I think the trap is for your goal to be just to sell the project or to get someone to buy into it. And a lot of times that's not necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing is to find another collaborator who believes in your project and who is the right person to shepherd that project or to take that project to the next step. And so you really, I think, want to honestly communicate what the project is, what it is that you're excited about by it, and to then find other people who have similar sensibilities and a similar passion for whatever it is you're trying to say. So figuring out how to do that is not easy, and I don't know that there's a quick or easy answer as to how to do it, but it's something that we constantly work on, constantly practice, and are really trying to always get better at.
Yeah, because you don't want to lose the authenticity that you have in this room when you take it to the suits, and that's like, it's not taught. That's just not a taught thing.
Totally.
Finding that balance.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I think part of it is understanding the language they speak as well. We have an artistic language. Sometimes they have a business language, and to understand that, like to sell it in those terms, I think of it less as that. I mean, when you ask the question, I more so thought of like how I handle the communication within a collaborative process, especially especially in theater, because I find that, you know, within television, there's a really strict hierarchy as to what, like, who's in charge and what notes need to be taken and what notes don't need to be taken. Yeah. But in theater, you're usually doing something that you're super duper passionate about. At least us, we don't really write a musical unless we're super duper passionate about it in some way. And then we've worked on it for years, and then suddenly we're in the rehearsal room, and this director's in charge making decisions. It's like, you know, we got to pick our battles, but we also have to, I think part of our journey is finding the courage to say the thing that may be an uncomfortable thing to say, but needs to be said. Like, I don't know. I don't know if the comedy's coming out in this scene. I think the staging is getting in the way of the comedy, or I'm not sure this is the right person to cast, or I'm not sure this person is, there's an unending amount of like weird creative things that the way I like to think of it is like just having candor, you know, with somebody, not like Candor and Ebb, but just having like artistic, just having artistic candor, you know, and just not being afraid to be like, gosh, I think the choreography is really messing up this scene in a way. I wouldn't put it that way, but I would be like, I'm having trouble understanding what's going on in this scene because the choreography feels really busy to me. You know what I mean? Like not being afraid to actually address the things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and leaving ego at the door. Yeah. Which I imagine you get better at cultivating, you know, the people you want to be around.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Do you, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's really key. This business is all about relationships, you know, and finding people who you connect with and who you have similar sensibilities with and who you love to create with. I often think about, you know, the reasons at least I got into theater in the first place, or my favorite things about early theatrical experiences had nothing to do with the show itself or the performance. You know, it was about the friendships. You got into it because it was fun to do and you got to be around a bunch of people that you liked. And I think that's still really true and very easy to lose sight of once you start doing something professionally and once money starts getting involved, you know. But I think it's incredibly important to find people that you work together with really well and that you can have those honest, open conversations with, some of which may be difficult at times. But, you know, I think what you said about checking your ego at the door is kind of the most important thing to keep in mind, and that it's not about ego. It's not about anything personal. If everyone is on the same team trying to create the best product possible, the best show, the best musical possible, and if that's everybody's focus, if everyone from the ground floor up is thinking about what decisions here make the most sense to tell this story the way we want to tell it, then it becomes much less about you than it is about the show. You know, I heard an interesting, I think it was a TED Talk with Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, who was talking all about the idea of genius and how genius, as we sort of think about it, is so tied to ego. And sort of the historical roots of that come from the Greeks, where it was thought to be a gift from the muses. You know what I mean? That your personal gift, any kind of artistic gift you had, wasn't yours. It wasn't about you as a person. It was about this sort of external supernatural force that was bestowing itself upon you. And the minute you start thinking of something that way, it really divorces it from ego, you know, and it's just about everyone kind of coming together to create this thing and to shape this thing together. And it can be really easy to lose sight of that, particularly in the heat of production. You know, there's so much else to worry about. But to me, that's kind of the grounding that those conversations should always come back to, is like, look, we can all be honest with each other and we can say what we think, and everybody has their opinion. Those are probably going to differ. If you're in a fruitful collaboration, you're not going to agree about everything. That's what leads to some really interesting work. But, you know, just not taking it personally and not making it about your own ego.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Have you guys gotten better at cultivating those friendships? I mean, at this point, you know who you know. So it's like, but, you know, finding new people or meeting new people, is there a, you know, you can feel that at hello? In a way?
Sometimes. I mean, I feel like, especially in this industry, there's a lot of ego. There's just everywhere. And I just know that I don't want to work with someone who's super egotistical, because it just gets in the way of the process. But I mean, the cool thing about living in New York and doing this is that you do meet a lot of people.
There's a lot of people.
A lot of people here. And the coolest thing ever is like seeing a new performer that you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to work with that person. Like a couple of the people that like do demo, actually our 2 demo singers for Vamp Arena are people that we saw perform somewhere, and we were like, this person is awesome, and I know this person can do our demos.
In a show or like a cabaret, or
one of them I'll just give her a name shout out, Haven Burton. I saw her, like, you know, Seth Rudetsky does that like playbill thing. Haven Burton did this one where she sang
Part of Your World.
Part of Your World, this crazy weird version of it where like she like doesn't have legs or something. It's hard to explain, but I saw that and I was like,
Google it.
Google it. It's really funny. And I was like, her voice sounds like a bell. Like, she is so gorgeous. And she just has this amazing... I was like, I know she's the kind of voice that I want for this demo for Vamp Arena. Because like, it's just like, she is a Disney princess. She just sounds like it. And then this other Greg... What's Greg's last name?
Hildreth. Greg Hildreth.
Oh my God, he's going to kill me. Greg Hildreth. We saw him recently. Well, it actually wasn't that recent. What was that show they did at Roundabout? That country sort of show... Leslie Kritzer was in it too. I can't remember what it was.
I saw him in Peter and the Starcatcher, I think.
I saw him in Peter and the Starcatcher years ago, but like it was around the time that we were like starting this Vamp Arena journey that I saw him do this super character-y performance, and I was like, I just went home to Chris and I was like, I think like Greg can do all these character voices that we need to do for these demos. So like that is the coolest thing about the city. There's so many talented people, and you know, sometimes I just like the voiceover demos that we do for Vamp Arena are so like specific. It's just like they have to be super duper clear,
like piano, vocal.
Actually, we do fully orchestrated demos. For Disney, we kind of have learned that like we need to show that sparkle and shine immediately, because sometimes people who wear a suit to work and are executives don't have the imagination that we do in the theater. They don't know that like what it will be or what it can be.
Of course.
But it's such a specific thing, like that we just knew we needed like people who had such amazing musicality, but also a versatility to cover these roles as we're making demos. But anyway, you were asking about meeting people. I'm just saying, like, there's so many cool people to meet, and when you find your tribe of people that you just love working with, you tend to just keep hiring them. You know?
Yeah. Do you guys enjoy the guidelines, you know, of having to create for someone else? I mean, it's a mixed bag, right? You enjoy creating your own stories, and you're also creating for, a company that wants a particular product. But do you enjoy the challenges of staying in the lane?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times those sort of restrictions are inspiring in a way. Yeah. Sometimes, obviously we love creating things that we're the drivers of and that have sprung from our imaginations. But it oftentimes is a neat challenge to have to write something that someone else sort of conceived of and is looking for something very particular. Those sorts of assignments force you to flex muscles that you might not flex as a writer otherwise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's also such a fun idea that certain characters, especially within Disney, only say a certain amount of things. You know, there's a certain pattern of speech that they will not. It just doesn't. It goes against the grain of who the character is. So that really have to stay in a cadence of speech. Can be challenging. Vamp Arena. What was the inception of that? Who found who? How did that come about?
We were actually doing so it goes back a little bit further. So the Vamp Arena was created by this amazing showrunner named Chris Nee, who also created Doc McStuffins, which was two of the like really successful Disney Channel shows for young kids. But we didn't meet her until a couple years ago. Essentially, we were doing a workshop of The Noteworthy Life of Howard Barnes at NAMT, and one of the Disney executives was there and saw our work, and he was like, "You guys should audition for our shows." We auditioned for a bunch of shows. We didn't get them, and then we finally got this one, the Vamp Arena, and so we were hired for this show, and it just changed our life, and it was just cool. I mean, Vamp Arena is about a vampire who moves from Transylvania to Pennsylvania and tries to fit in. So it's a show. Yeah. It's a show about like differences. It's a show about accepting people for who they are. It's a show about like, your heritage and your culture and how much you keep and how much you take from the new place you go. There's so many, and it's just, about accepting yourself for who you are and accepting your friends for who you are. There's all these like wonderful like ideas baked into it. But there's also, they're vampires. So there's a certain amount of like theatricality to it, which kind of was perfect for us because we are musical theatre writers. But yeah, it was just cool. I mean, honestly, we've written 150 songs for this show, and it's just been so awesome because you just learn a lot about your writing when you write 150 songs. Especially like I would be like, you know what? I am writing the same chord progression that I wrote in song number 17, and I need to push myself to write something different and more interesting than that.
Song 142.
Yes, exactly. And you see kind of where you're repeating yourself a little bit when you're especially when you're having to write that many songs in sort of a small period of time. It's easy to fall in your same traps, it's harder to push yourself to do something different and do something better and do something outside of your comfort zone, which is sort of how I used Vamp Arena at a certain point. I was like, I want to find a new way to write in this world, as a way of pushing myself.
Now they never do get empty, but the creative tanks, so to speak, when they get empty or you feel like they're empty, do you do anything in particular to spark creativity? Take a walk, listen to something, shake it up?
Yeah, I like to get outside and take a walk and clear my head, or just listen to music that's entirely different with whatever we're working on, or to watch something. I think you can look for inspiration in a lot of different places. Yeah. Reading, I think, always helps too.
Yeah, but like nonfiction, fiction, anything.
I read mostly fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I generally just we just take a break, or we just end for the day. There's been a couple days writing for Vamp Arena where we're like, I don't know if I can come up with a better idea right now. Like, I'm just done for the day, and so we'll just have to write tomorrow. Yeah. And thankfully we're able to sometimes do that, just stop and just not. I think the best thing to do is just not think about it for a little bit, think about something completely different. Also like Stephen Schwartz had this really amazing quote that I heard a couple years ago that was like, there's no such thing as writer's block. What the actual thing is your editor brain is too strong. You're saying you're being too hard on yourself, which is in some ways true, in the sense of just write something, and trust that you'll be able to craft or edit it tomorrow in a way. Just write something, get it out, and then reassess tomorrow. If it's a piece of crap, then just throw it out. But if it's maybe there's an iota of good things within it that you can say, that was a good hook, so I'll keep that hook, and then I'll change the verse and chorus. You know what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean. And I've found that a few times writing, I'll just write what seems like throw up words, and then go back and I'm like, oh, well, there's something good in there.
Yeah.
There's something, we can edit this so it's grammatically correct.
Yeah. Totally.
Looking towards the future, Are you guys setting goals? Have you guys set goals? Do you set goals? What are you looking towards?
We often set goals. We like to
love
make
that.
goals for ourselves, long term and short term, and then try to cross them off the list. It's really, really satisfying to cross something off of a list. I find that's one of the best feelings in the world. So I think we're both very goal driven people, and we like to push ourselves. So it's helpful to lay out specific goals, even if you don't end up meeting all of them. Striving for that is always gonna be productive in some way or other.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%.
Totally, yeah. I mean, we have recently just started like a Google Doc where we're just like, what's our goal this month? What's our goal this year? Where do we want to be in 5 years? Just because it's so easy to get like caught up in the fray and just to not. I just think it's better. I think we're just more effective and better entrepreneurs in a sense if we're just like writing like, okay, we want to write a full-length musical before December so that we can send it out to workshops in the spring or something like that. Or, like we want to write a new song a week for the next month or something like that. So that, I don't know, we just trying to do that and hold ourselves accountable,
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to have a destination.
Totally.
So, and it's okay if it changes, but to head
Totally.
towards that is so smart. What are you consuming, when you're not consuming your own creations? What are you watching? Movies? You're reading? You're listening?
My favorite thing these days is the Spotify recommended playlist. I've been trying to like game the system of Spotify and like all of the things that I really like, go and follow the artists that I've been listening to for like 20 years or like my favorite artists, and then liking all of my favorite songs in hopes that Spotify will recommend some amazing songs to me, and I am just loving it. I love discovering new music, and it is like my favorite thing right now
it's constantly surprising you.
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Like I'm obsessed with discovering new artists and new songs that I love that I haven't heard of.
That's great. That's really great.
I wish I could say theater first and foremost, which obviously, I consume as much theater as possible. But right now, I just feel like we're in a golden age of television, and I love nothing more than just immersing myself in the binge watching of a TV show. I feel like there's so much good content out there. And I just love TV right now. I think that there's really, really interesting, exciting stuff happening in TV, and it's fascinating to see what sort of the Netflix model has done to television, what it's opened up and allowed for. I think is really thrilling.
Are you on like the crime dramas or any of those? There's so many police shows right now, but anything else too? There's tons.
I run the gamut. I watch a lot. I watch a lot of TV, sadly, but I'm not sad about it. I'm not.
You're a little.
I'm
sad
proud.
about it.
I'm proud of how much television I watch. I usually am 3 to 4 years behind everyone else because I like to wait until I know something is good after like 20 people have recommended it to me. Okay. So that way there's already 5 seasons that I can, just lose my life to. So I just finished Fleabag was the thing I would say I was most excited by that I just watched, which I feel like is also makes me feel good because it started out in the theater. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. I just did that with The Sopranos.
Wow.
Although 20 years late to the game on that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It all makes sense because now I've watched, Game of Thrones, and it's like, oh, I see what they do. I see the pattern, how that changed TV. Why that was a big deal. So, but it's good. That's homework. That's research. So it's not a bad thing.
I think that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me in terms of being a writer was the day I realized I could write off watching television as a research. The minute you can justify that to yourself, it's really dangerous.
Oh my goodness. This is great, guys. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
It's
for
been
having
a pleasure.
us.
Of course. Final question as we wrap up. Billboard quote. Metaphorically speaking, a word or a phrase that you'd put on a billboard for millions of people to see. Does anything come to mind?
I have a one that I think of a lot, but I so fail at this all the time. Sort of my like little mantra is like have a clear head and a kind heart, but I always fail.
But keep remembering.
Yeah.
To keep reminding yourself of that. It's really, I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would say there's a quote I read in a novel recently that really resonated with me and has stuck with me ever since. And it's, the stupid human heart couldn't help but hope. I just love that sentiment so much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, without hope, what do you
Yeah.
have?
Mhm.
For the
And
future.
it seems sometimes to be so illogical to do so. I think particularly with where we are in the world right now, but
Yeah.
that's what being human is. You know what I mean? It's finding that hope amidst everything else that's going on around you.
Keeping it alive.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's beautiful. Guys, is there anything else you want to add to this before we wrap on up? Have we
Thank
hit
you.
it?
I
Just-
think
thank you.
you've
Of
hit
course.
everything. You've hit everything that we want to hit.
Great. I love it. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Michael Kooman and Chris Dimond.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.